Welcome, everyone. My name is Brooke Hiddink. I am the founder, along with David Mendez, of the High Ticket Ecom Incubator. Today we have Tommy. Tommy, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Tommy. I'm part of the incubator. I was one of the OGs, I like to say. I think I was in the first 15 members, so I feel like an OG. I live in California, and yeah, been on the journey for almost 6 months now.
Awesome stuff, man. Yeah, you definitely were one of the OGs. I think we had chatted actually first before we launched, and then you were thinking about it for a bit, and then you joined like the third or fourth day. So definitely in the first 10 who joined.
Yes, there's like a group of us where we're like the OGs, and we talk, so it's good.
That's cool, man. So before you started the business, what were you doing from a job perspective? Is that what you're still doing now, or what did that job look like?
Yeah, so I was a marketing director at an ecom brand, was kind of one of those COVID 0 to 50 million in 3 years, just crazy parabolic growth. So I was doing marketing for them, and about 2 years into it, just kind of the thought of like, man, I'm putting all of my effort and skill set and ideation into making two other guys really rich, basically. And it was kind of like, man, I need to take this skill set and build something on my own. And so I was doing that, and then found you. For me, it was like knowing like, okay, I need the right business model though, because I've seen a bunch of like things, and like it needs to like contextually make sense. And then started reading your threads, and made a lot of sense to me. And then basically joined, and then I ended up actually leaving that job and am now helping grow another kind of health brand. So that's been kind of interesting, but yeah, that's what I was doing before. I still have a job in marketing, just kind of more to start up as I do this.
So how have you found? I know with the other company, it was a lower ticket item compared to what we sell. So probably a
Yes.
lot of Facebook ads kind of thing, I would guess. How have you found that your experience from that job has actually played into running this business? Is it completely different? Has it helped you, do you think?
I think like the marketing fundamentals definitely carried over of just conversion rate optimization on the website, kind of understanding ads from a broad perspective and maybe the user journey like online. As far as the
Yep.
actual model itself, very different. So this is like, hundreds, potentially thousands of sales a day in the business I was at. So tons of customer service. Like customer service was such a nightmare. Inventory issues, things like that. And so part of the high ticket thing was like, oh, you can make 1 to 2 sales a day to have a very healthy, profitable store. That feels very manageable. And so, yeah, I would say there's marketing, obviously fundamentals that carry over, business models pretty different. Even the way you acquire a customer, very different. The company I was at was more of like an impulse buy, whereas this is a very
Yep.
long buyer journey. So some differences, but definitely helped.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It's kind of like from a first principles perspective, it's all really the same thing. It's just how we're actually going about accomplishing that thing is very different. That
Yeah.
makes sense. So you joined, I believe it was late October. When did you make your very first sale? I know with you, we kind of not a tough niche, but we definitely had to think about things a little bit differently. We took into account your interests, so it took you a little bit longer than some other people who started in other areas. Like, when was that first sale for you?
Yeah. Well, it was funny because the first, I don't know if it counts. I'm going to count it, but it was basically, it was in, I think it was like, honestly, like 5 weeks after I started. So I think it was like mid December or early December. And I remember I was like working on the
Okay.
store, and I got a Shopify notification. And I was like, why do I have a Shopify notification? Like, that's how early I was. And it said like, someone has bought something for $26 on the store, and I was like, 20, what is 26? I thought this was high ticket. Like, what is $26? It was like the smallest individual accessory that goes to something big, and I was like, I didn't even know this was on the store. But honestly, I was so happy. It was wild. It was like, wait, someone, like, this website did not exist 4 weeks ago, and somebody just entered their credit card information and like just
Yeah.
purchased something. Wild. So that was technically my first sale. Um, you know, whatever, but definitely changes your mindset when you make $1 on the internet.
It does. It really does. It sounds very cliche, but as soon as you see that first notification, it's like, holy shit, it's actually possible. So when was the first, I guess, let's say sale over
Okay,
$1,000?
that doesn't count. In January. So I actually did something wrong with the ads like in December. So I wasn't adjusting something right, and it was in hindsight. I'm like, oh my gosh, duh. But I think I kind of look at December being like, oh, I wasn't really in the game because I
Yeah.
just wasn't spending on ads. So it was December that was the first sale over $1,000. Or sorry,
And just
January.
January. So a couple months then. So I think we launched in October. Yeah. So still, man, that's still quite quick, considering like you said, the website wasn't in existence, and then 2 months later, you have someone entering the credit card for over $1,000. Still, like it sounds. I know you had a lot of work in there in the meantime, but that's still super impressive.
When I
And
tell people, like, sorry to interrupt, I was in the sauna like 2 hours ago talking about the model and whatever. And if you tell people you can start a business and get sales within 2 months, 3 months, it is like there's no other model where that exists. They're
no,
like they're always like leaning in, like, wait, so how does this work? And then when I explain it, they're like, wow, this makes so much sense. But yeah, I mean, it's like I think like, why did it take so long? But it was like, in no other business model is this even relatively possible.
exactly. And we were talking a bit before. So, what did you do the last 30 days in sales? And I guess how have you found that, as we were discussing, like your mindset shifts kind of the longer you're in the game, the more things start to make sense. How have you found that that's kind of played out for you?
Yeah. So in the last 30 days, we've done 33,000 in sales, maybe more, probably more. I think in the last 3 weeks we've done 33. There might be some carryover there. I think it's just this thing of like, don't stop before it starts working. In the sense of
Exactly.
like, if you do, and I think this is what I love about the program so much. If you follow the playbook and if you do literally the four things that like result in having a successful store, then it really is a matter of time. And even like the last 3 weeks, there was a 7-10 day period where there was no sales, like nothing. And then in 3 days did $18,000 in sales. And it's
That's how
like,
it works usually. Yeah.
yeah. And in those 10 days, you're like, is there something wrong with my website? Is there, you're kind of like,
You
and it's
start
like, no,
going through
just
like checkouts yourself, like something must be
totally.
broken, but there's never
And
anything
it's,
broken.
yeah, it's like, okay. But it's just that thing of just consistently do the things you know to do, and then the results will happen. And so for me, it's really been like January and February was slow, fine, nothing. And then March and April, it's really started to like compound. And I'm like, oh, this thing is working and it's growing. And so, and really, it's like I haven't changed anything I'm doing. It's just the more
Yeah.
consistently you do something, then the results happen. So that's what it's been like for me.
To me, I see a lot of parallels in business and in like with athletics and sports. I know you used to be a soccer guy. We'll dive into that in a minute, but like it's kind of like if you're going to the gym. Let's say if you're like super out of shape and you're unhealthy, and you start eating healthy and you start going to the gym. Like 1 month later, you're probably not going to look that different, even though you're doing everything right. And then 2 months later, you might see a little bit of results. And then 3 months later, it's like holy shit. 4 months later, 5 months later, it's like okay, now I'm seeing real changes. And to me, it's really the same thing. Like to be in good shape, you have to be active, lift heavy weights, and eat healthy. And if you do those things over a long period of time, the results are going to be there. And here, it's we got to close good suppliers, we got to have a
Yes.
good website, and we have to run proper ads. If we do those three things, it will
Yes.
eventually work. It's very much
Yes.
the same thing. Have you
Yes.
taken, I guess, in your past athletics, fitness journey, have you taken a lot of like the same principles from there and applied that to business?
Yeah, I think there's like that innate kind of competition or pushing for kind of more and always wanting to progress and kind of that similar. The athlete mindset just is literally the business mindset, just more with your brain than your body. But I think for me, because I've so since leaving soccer, I've always been worked for companies or worked for brands or, but now when this is my company, that element being an owner, it requires the level of discipline like you're an athlete in the sense of you're getting up at 6 a.m. for training, like you're just doing that. You're not having to decide. That's just the reality. You're not like, oh, today I'm not going to train. It's like, no, you show up to train. That kind of level of consistency and discipline I found like is essential. And so for me, I think it's more been on the discipline side of like showing up and doing the things that you may not want to do or may not feel to do, but it's exactly what you have to do. That for me has probably been the biggest thing that I've seen carry over. And honestly, like just the ability to deal with problems. I
Yeah,
feel
stress
like
tolerance.
stress tolerance, yes. Or like in a game when everything's going wrong, it's like, oh yeah, you have to deal with it, you have to solve it. You can't, you can't be emotional about it or just. And I think that really carries over to business too, because you just realize it's like, oh, business is just putting out fires is literally all it is, essentially. And if you can be comfortable in that, and if you can actually embrace that, good things will happen. I was telling someone, I feel like the goal of a business is to try to get you to quit, because a business can only reward like a certain like a few select people, and so it needs to get everyone else to quit, and the ones that stick it out will actually get rewarded. And I'm saying that like this has been such a dramatic journey, and it really hasn't. But just those things of, oh, this isn't going right, or oh, this is broken, or I think being an athlete, it helps in that stress tolerance, like you said.
I think you're right, man. I never thought about it like that, but I think you made a really good point. Like it's the people who succeed in business aren't necessarily the ones who have the secret hack or like the magic formula. It's just literally the ones who don't quit. The ones who
Right.
actually just stay in the game long enough for the results to compound and actually happen without them quitting before that happens. That's
Yeah.
really it. That's
Yeah.
really it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But what were you kind of expecting coming in from a work perspective? Like, did you expect it to be as hard as it's been? Did you expect it to be easier? What were your expectations compared to what it's actually been like?
Yeah. I think because I have like marketing background or web or I've kind of been involved in the stuff that's required for this. I was expecting like I didn't think like, oh, this is gonna be easy. This is no problem. It's a shoe in. I would say it about matched what I thought. Um,
Mhm.
I think some things took longer, like building my site. It's like that just took so long, and now I could probably do it in, like you said, a tenth of the time. Uh,
Yeah.
and so it probably has been less work than I thought, um, because there is such a spelled out playbook for you. So follow the directions, and there's a lot of almost like mental decision making taken out of it, because you really are just following a playbook, and which is why coaching program's so good. So I would say it's been about like what I've expected. With that being said, I when people have like asked me about it, I'm like, oh, it's a lot of work. Like you
Yes.
have to be very like committed, because it's like you are going to be doing everything. Especially people like coming from jobs, or like, oh, you'll just have the web developer do that, or you'll just have the customer service. It's like, no, you're all those roles.
Outsource though. Like
Totally.
I don't think you can ever really hire a customer service rep or something, especially with our products. Like it's not like you can just answer the phone and like start answering questions your first day. Like you have to actually kind of know them a little bit. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of learn it yourself to actually ever really outsource something. I've found anyway.
Yeah, it's a long way of saying I think it's about what I thought, but with that, it's a good amount of work, as it should be. I
Yeah.
think maybe it's like it should, if you're building a business that's going to be successful, it should be a lot of work.
Yeah, it's not a get rich quick scheme by any means. It's a real business, requires real work, but obviously it's possible, which I think is what a lot of people are looking for. For me, I know when I started, I wanted to start a business forever, but I just didn't have a vehicle to put my effort into. Like I thought like I'm gonna have to buy inventory, I'm gonna have to do all this stuff that I literally can't afford right now. But this business model, it does essentially allow you to get started with very little upfront capital, and it is a real business that can deliver you results in a relatively short time frame. But yes, you have to 100% put the work in.
Yeah. I always think about, because I have friends who started direct to consumer brands, and I'm like, man, they had to develop a product, they had to get it sorted. I mean, all that takes like it could take a year just to get like
Yeah.
a working, and then you have to produce it, then you have to buy it, then you have to ship it. I'm like, dude, we have it easy compared to, and we're selling, $5,000-$10,000 items. Like they're selling $60. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, in the e-com world, like we have it good.
We do. We do. So
Yeah.
at this point, have you delegated anything to this point? Do you have any like full-time employees? Do you just use like product uploaders? What have you taken off your plate, and what do you still look after yourself?
Yeah. So I could probably do a better job of this. We have a VA, and she primarily does product uploads, and she's pretty good with like web stuff. And so I'll have her do a lot of the web management, whether that's building collection pages, updating apps that need to be updated. Um, but that's primarily her role, and then my wife and I are doing the business together, and so that's actually nice too. And so we kind of share the rest as far as closing suppliers, running the ads. We still do customer support. I think at some point, yeah, obviously at some point we'll delegate that, but it's been. I mean, I'm like kind of working on my computer all day anyway, so at this point, it hasn't gotten to the volume to where um, it needs to be, but that'll probably be soon.
Yeah, it is kind of a weird thing to outsource because no matter who you have deal with your customers, they're not going to care as much as you, as the business owner, and you will do a better job. But it just has to reach the point where it's like, okay, I'm spending all this time on customer service. I can accept a temporary setback in sales because my time is actually better spent on doing this other thing, whatever
Yeah.
that is. But it is a
Yeah.
weird transition.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to like keep telling myself that. I don't, yeah, I think that'll probably come soon, but it's a good point.
So I guess joined late October. November, you were kind of building the store. December, you didn't really have the ads going well. January, made your first sale and kind of slowly ramped up to the point where you're at like 30, 35,000 a month right now. Were there any breaking points in that process that you think made a difference where something just clicked to you, whether it was like ads, whether it was your website, or like one kind of breaking point that you changed or something clicked in your head that really started making a difference in terms of your results?
Yeah. I think I asked myself the question, which I think helped kind of get some sort of results, is like, I need to give someone a reason to buy on my store that has only existed for 3 months, that has limited reviews or things like that. Like, why would they buy here when they can go buy from a more established store that's been around for 5 years, that's bidding higher than me? Like, I need to actually give them a reason to
Yeah.
choose my store, um, to where they're not even going to go to another store. So then now I have to communicate that in an ad. Okay, so where am I going to communicate that in an ad? And you start kind of just start to like problem solve of like, okay, if I'm a consumer, like what's going to cause me to go, oh, I'm going to buy here and I don't even need to look anywhere else because I'm able to offer something no one else is. So from there, then you go, okay, well, then you need to have the margin to be able to like do something like that, whether it's offer installation, offer a discount, whatever. Um, so then it really goes, okay, I need to focus on these three brands realistically. I can offer something that the competition's currently not. And in doing that, it really clarified like, oh, here's kind of where I feel like I can win. Really focusing on that. And that's been where a lot of the sales have come from. Or at least where, oh, okay, now I see this is working is kind of,
Yeah.
there started to be consistent, like that started to convert. And so I would say that maybe that's, I would say that's like maybe 40 to 50% of it. And then honestly, I think it's just, again, like I said, doing the things you know to do long enough, just the results happen. If there was one thing, maybe I think that's the thing that, from a strategy perspective, maybe that I was thinking through that could have helped. But other than that, it was just over long enough time, the results happen.
Yeah, and that's essentially just like making a good offer, which is any business, whether it's a
Yeah.
service business, an agency, it's just having a good offer. Like you said, why is this person going to buy from you and not the other person? There's lots of Facebook ads agencies. There's lots of the same service providers, but why are you going to pick the one? It just really comes down, like you said, to the marketing fundamentals.
Yeah.
So at this point, how many brands do you have live on your store? How many do you have closed, and how many do you have live on your store?
I think we have between 30 and 35 on the store. We went to a trade show, so we made friends with one of our suppliers, and then he invited us to like a really big trade show, got us tickets for free. So like we went down
Is it,
there
is,
and
is it the guy I'm thinking of? Start with
no,
a T?
no,
No.
but he was there, and it was.
He was there? Did you meet him in person?
I did not meet him. I avoided him at all costs. No,
You
I
would
like
have to talk
walked
to him
by.
for 3 hours.
I was like, that's him. Wow, we spent so much time on the phone, and he probably doesn't even know who I am. Um, yeah, that's good. So that was cool. Got brands on that we probably wouldn't have otherwise. And just good context to just know, like, okay, here's kind of the lay of the land. So yeah, 30, 35. We pretty much, I think we have like two or three brands that are closed that aren't on the site yet. But that's kind of like one of the big initiatives in the next month or two is like, okay, we need the next batch of high quality suppliers. But that's where we're at right now.
The sales you brought into this point, has it been like an 80-20 situation where like the two or three brands are making up the majority of those sales, or what's the distribution looking like sales wise?
Yeah, I would say 80% of the sales are coming from 20% of the suppliers. Yep.
And do you think that's just because you're doing that kind of offer formulation thing a little bit differently for those two? Do you think that that's something you could extrapolate to some of the other brands you already have to improve there, or do you not see as much opportunity?
I think so. There are some like limitations around what I'm currently doing. Like I can do it for some brands, I can't do it with others. There's probably opportunity there.
Yeah.
But I would say like the majority of sales have come from 4 to 5 suppliers. Yeah, and then there's the one-off kind of like free listing, random sale you'll get like.
A lot of the time people ask me like, oh, if two stores have the same suppliers, like is it going to hurt like the competition wise? And it's kind of weird to me. Like I see people even in the program who have suppliers on my store that I don't do well with, but they're crushing it with these suppliers because that's their focus. It's just like their bread and butter
Mm.
per se. So you could have kind of a broader store, but your bread and butter can be in like one or two specific things, and that's kind of where you get your results, even though there's some overlap with different stores.
That's interesting. Yeah, I actually haven't thought about that. It makes sense though. Like, yeah, whatever you put a focus on will increase.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your longer term goals for the store? I guess in the near term, is it something you want to keep building up and kind of replace your job income and go all in on that? Is it something you'd eventually like to build up and then sell? What are your goals for the store?
I would like to build it over the next 3 to 5 years as big as I possibly can, and really have it as an asset that, yeah, I think like ultimately I just want to be a business owner. So this is kind of the first business that I own. So it's like, all right, let's maximize that and then we'll see. I've actually, from this store, I sold a product to a guy that I work at a co-working space with from my
Yeah.
store, and it gave me this idea of like, oh, I think there's like a real lean local business that can kind of offshoot out of this, which is more of a service business. And so I think there's almost like ideas coming from the store that I'm building as well. It's also connected to like what I care about and who I am. So I actually think like from the store there could probably be other things. But my goal with the store is to maximize the value over the next 3 to 5 years, potentially sell it, or I don't know, like just keep it as an asset. Yeah, for me, it's like, oh, I just want to get really good at being a business owner, and so
Yep.
let's do it with this, and however big that can go, great. But for me, I'm looking like 2 to 3 years. Like, what can we do with it?
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And you'll find that like the first business is exponentially the hardest. Like any business you do in the future, even if it's not high ticket drop shipping, any business you do in the future will be way easier just because you now understand the fundamentals. It's almost like learning to walk when you're starting a business because everything's
Yeah,
really the same if you operate from a first principles perspective. So
yeah.
that kind of just leads into the last question. If you were speaking with someone who's considering the business model to get started for their first business, obviously, as we've discussed, not a great get rich quick scheme. It is very hard work. But what advice would you have for them about the business model overall, and then as well as the program that I run?
Yeah. I would say, if the goal is to make money on the internet, because I was someone that looked at a bunch of different things. And for me, high ticket drop shipping, it's the leanest, it's the least operationally intensive, it's quite profitable. So for me, it like checks all those boxes. So I'm like, oh, if that's what someone's considering, for me, this feels very sound and it's very straightforward. Like it's
It is.
not, there's no, genius about it in the sense of, yeah, you don't have to dream up a product idea that has product market fit and you struck gold with whatever your product is. It's like, you're tapping into existing demand and doing that. So, for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. And that's kind of what like led me to, I honestly felt like from what I learned from you just from consuming the content, I'm like, oh, I think I could just take this and do it, which I maybe could have. For me, why I joined the program was, but it's just the value of a coach. So asking the follow-up questions, like, right, you have the blueprint, but like someone there that's going like, here's the nuanced stuff. Here, I've been there, and here's what you need to know. For me, or for anyone, that's invaluable. The other side of that is having accountability and having a playbook. Yeah. So I remember like when I started, it was like, okay, first 3 days you're incorporating your business, you're doing these 3 things, by day 7, you will have X, amount done. And I just know like if I didn't have that, it would have taken longer. So it's not even like, because I think you have like a free course where it's like, oh, the instructions are there. But like a lot of times information's not the gap. It's usually accountability. It's usually having a playbook that you can step into and just executing. So for me, that's what I've loved about the course in these 6 months is like, it just fast tracks everything.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal. It's like when we built it, the goal was never to sell the information on how to do this. The goal was to sell the accountability, the coaching, and the community aspect. And that's kind of everything that's not the information. So like in the free course, the process is the same. Like you're going to do the same things, but it's the community, it's having my advice on the things, actually going through the process, and it's having like a group of people doing the same thing and accountability so you can get like checked in with every week. It's very much, we try and make it like a done with you thing, where we're kind of like doing this with you. You're not just like out on your own trying to figure it out.
I remember when we were trying to select the niche and I had kind of built out things and I went through one and you were like, oh, hey, yeah, that doesn't have good margin. Let's move on. And I was like, oh, like I wouldn't have known that. Like I could have like built a whole store and it's like, gosh, that could have just saved me so much. So even like things like that, I'm like, yeah, that's huge. The other part I think too is being in the group. There's so many things that you run into that other people have run into, like just weird bans or, hey, this happened in Shopify. Is anyone else? And inevitably someone's like, oh yeah, here's what you do. And so there's just a knowledge share where that is just like, if you're doing it on your own, you don't have that. And so it just, again, makes things very easy and it fast tracks things.
Yeah, it's even cool for me now, like to have, when you started, obviously it was pretty much just me running the coaching calls, but now we have people who are like experts, like Trigvies to run the SEO call, and we have Connor running the email call. We're like, these are people who I go to advice on those things. So like they know better than me in their areas. So it's almost cool that like I can use the group for advice myself on some of these things, which I'm sure people like you take a ton of value from like in these other areas.
Yeah, that's huge because it really, once you kind of have your store, then it becomes about like these focused things, maximizing those. And so having coaches, having experts in those particular fields ends up being like a big maximizer.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, man. That's all for the questions. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Great chat, and we'll stay on for a minute and chat again. But thanks a lot, man.
Cool.